Thursday, everybody. I am your host, Nate, Mr. Fantasy Polvogt, and today I have a fantastic guest. I like to call him the godfather of fantasy football analysis because, let's be honest, Bob, without you, we're not here. I know Matthew Berry gets a ton of credit too, but you deserve just as much. Mr. Bob Harris, folks, I am so excited to have you on the show today. Bob, thank you so much for coming on with me.
Happy to be here, Nate. I was looking for another box. Where's the great guy?
Oh, come on. You're too humble now. Bob, I'm so excited to have you on to answer some of these questions. We've had some really interesting things happen over the last couple of weeks with free agency, and now we're approaching the draft and Lamar Jackson, Brock Purdy. We've got a lot to get to here. So let's go ahead and get into those questions. And the first one, as I just mentioned, Lamar Jackson requested a trade. We found out on March 2nd. Now, do you have a spot that you would like to see him go if he does get traded or signed by another team?
Well, I mean, what does Lamar want? Well, according to notifications coming into my phone as we speak, he wants New England. He wants to play for the Patriots. We've heard a lot of discussion, this would be a Patriotsy kind of move. I'm not sure that it would be. We'll see. I mean, I'm looking for places where there's some talent and a need. And I mean, Tampa Bay comes right to mind. Where they have a pair of great receivers. I think one thing I'm not going to do this year, Nate, kind of in an associated note, is downgrade receivers as much where I have a perceived issue with the quarterbacks. According to DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett, Amari Cooper, I mean, bad situations, quarterback situations don't necessarily mean horrible seasons. So I'm hoping for the best for those Buccaneers, but a better quarterback, an upgraded quarterback would be fantastic. I'm told Lamar throws really well for a running back. Playing the joke that he often plays. Look, I think he's a fantastic passer, and that would be a nice landing spot for me. But ideally, somewhere where Lamar is going to be happy and eager to ply his trade, and it sounds like New England's his ultimate destination. I think he will end up playing for Baltimore or no one, and it sounds like no one is becoming increasingly realistic at this point. But again, I'll remind everyone out there: the public portion of negotiations and these discussions are always the most contentious part. And, often the most contentious moments come right before a deal is struck. So, I mean, not that I expect anything soon in Baltimore. And I guess my concern there is I want him to go where he's happy, just so he gets out there and gets some work in before a season, right? I don't want him walking into a building a week before the season and trying to cobble something together.
So he says he wants to be in New England. Now,
apparently.
Allegedly. Now, I've seen some mocks over the last couple of days for the NFL draft that had changed a little bit from where we saw most people thinking Indianapolis was going to take a quarterback at 4. Now, I've seen like 4 or 5 mocks where they're not taking a quarterback anymore at that 4th pick. Could that be an indication that maybe there's some insider grumblings that Indianapolis might be in on a guy like Lamar Jackson trying to acquire him? I mean, Jim Irsay seems like crazy enough to pay him.
Right. I think he'd like to do it, but I don't know that he's crazy enough to fully guarantee the contract. And that seems to be the sticking point. And we can, discuss the collusion or however we want to put it. Whether it's collusion for a group of people to all sit down and tacitly agree without talking about it, that they're not going to pay guaranteed contracts. I mean, that opens the door to somebody being willing to do it. If it was somebody, I mean, I think it would be Irsay, but he's kind of thrown out there that he doesn't really want to go. He'd like Lamar, or they are open to it, but not really interested in that fully guaranteed money. So I think that's the concern. I know Arthur Blank threw out we're worried about health concerns. Well, you could say that about every player in the NFL. So I don't buy that so much as a reason. I mean, you're going to have to pay for all these guys. And honestly, the sooner you get a deal done, the better off you are, right? I mean, you can look at how the trajectory is going for quarterback pay. I mean, if you think Patrick Mahomes' deal was great when he signed it, it was, but it's, we're all going to be not talking about it very soon as guys like Joe Burrow and Justin Herbert, Jalen Hurts, all in line for new deals. And if, somebody was smart, they'd probably get Lamar Jackson done to a long-term deal. But like, again, I think we're projecting a lot of things. We've only recently heard from Lamar. And, clearly he's not happy with the current circumstances, but we didn't entirely know that. We were just, going based on what we could see on the surface. There's a lot more above the surface, below the surface than we see above the surface. So I'm not giving up hope of a return to Baltimore, but honestly, I like Todd Monken. I like the offense. I like the production he had in college the last couple of years, some of the personnel, groupings he used in Georgia. It would fit really well with Baltimore, meaning the multiple tight end sets, etc. So, I mean, there are some things to like, but if Lamar isn't there all offseason long, getting up to speed on it, I know Monken said, it's just football. He'd pick it up quick. Well, I don't think that's ideal. So I guess my ideal landing spot would be somewhere where Lamar is happy and wants to get right to work. And apparently New England would fit that bill.
Well, we could see a return to dominance in New England if he lands there. Now, I want to kind of piggyback off of this quarterback talk here. We've got this question. How do you rank this incoming quarterback class? I mean, I think it's consensus. Everybody seems to think that CJ Stroud's the number one quarterback in this class.
I agree with that. Like, I'm just going to acknowledge right now, I'm not a draftnik. I'm not watching college football during the NFL seasons. I watch the NFL and I cover that. So I play a lot of catch up. I listen to a lot of smart people. I think CJ Stroud is a guy that's grown a little bit. I mean, if you're just looking at the basics, I think Will Levis looks like, the all airport team guy. And for that reason, I'm probably moving him to the bottom of that top group. But I like it. Stroud, Young, and Richardson, acknowledging that Richardson might be the guy that shifts the whole thing around, right? That he might be the guy that comes out of nowhere with a little more experience and gets things done. I think the team would be wise to take a chance on him, especially a team that maybe could give him a year to sit and learn. But I'm looking at you, Indy. You add the Gardner Minshew. I mean, it seems like they've put themselves in a good position for this. And maybe we'll find out. I know the mocks have kind of dialed back on that, but if they jump up ahead of Arizona, that would pretty much seal the deal, to make sure nobody else could jump ahead of them. And then after that, I think, it's kind of open again. I mean, I think I started out in the Levis, kind of side of things, but now I think, Hendon Hooker seems to be gaining some steam, and it seems like the more, people talk about him, the more everyone goes back and looks and says, oh yeah, I guess maybe there's a reason. I think maybe it started with did Daniel Jeremiah have him going where, Minnesota was it or something in his most recent mock, and like Levis going to Tampa Bay in that mock in the 3.0 that Daniel Jeremiah did, makes some sense as well. But probably, Hooker seems to be gaining momentum. So I guess that would be my order is Stroud, Young, Richardson, Hooker, and Levis.
I'm on board with that. I really like Hendon Hooker a lot. Now, how much do you like Hendon Hooker? Mike Tannenbaum, 33rd team, mocked him.
Right.
Number 5 to Seattle. This was a hot button topic on the In-Between show with Seth this week. It made Seth angry.
Right. Well, honestly, that's the kind of buzz that gets teams out there looking at guys and starting to think maybe I missed something, and checking back and circling around and seeing if there is something, and that it's, this is kind of how the dynamic of the draft works. These guys gain a little run heading into the draft, and it goes from there, and not always deservedly so. But in this case, it seems like there's a little something to hang your hat on. I know a lot of the draftnicky kind of people I hang out with really like him a lot. So I'm moving him ahead of Levis.
I love it. So we've got a question in the chat from Jason Allwine. Would Belichick agree to pay that much for Lamar, do you think? Because, I mean, he's a notoriously kind of tight-pursed guy.
Well, there's a couple, things there. I mean, they brought in Bill O'Brien to be the offensive coordinator. I think there's, number one, he's an offensive coordinator. Wow, imagine that. Yeah, right. So that's a big shift. But, I mean, not that he's worked closely, but he knows Mac Jones a little bit. And, you wonder if they're not going to try and get the most out of him. But honestly, I feel like this would be, that kind of move that would move them right back into conversation. And he's done surprising things that have surprised me in the past. And I mean, going all the way back into, stepping away from the Jets, I mean, he'll on occasion do some things that you're not expecting. So I wouldn't entirely rule this out. I mean, there's kind of been some buzz about this now for, a little while. And I don't think that, people aren't out there throwing it out there to end up looking stupid. I think they're throwing it out there because they think they might end up looking smart. And I think there's enough smoke there that there's something to it. But that's the thing. Would Belichick actually agree to pay him? How long does Belichick plan to stick around? I mean, maybe leave that for somebody else.
That's a fair point. That's a very fair point. Now, I got a question here in the chat. This is a little bit of a pivot, Bob. This is going to be a trade question here from James McManus. Would you guys trade Tyler Algier for Kittle in a non-PPR 10-person league? I'm going to start off by saying absolutely not. There's no way I'd make this move. it just, the value on Kittle is too high still. And regardless of who's the quarterback, whether it's Purdy to start the season, whether it's Trey Lance to start the season, whether it's Sam Darnold to start the season, Kittle's kind of that safety blanket guy who I think is just going to draw targets and yards.
Seemed like things went really well with him with Brock Purdy. I know we'll talk about that a little bit more. Yeah, I'm not. I mean, I'm trying to go into things looking at players, kind of how the NFL values players, right? And the NFL is not big on running backs right now. That doesn't mean running backs aren't essential to your fantasy success, and having a productive one isn't going to be very helpful for you. It's just how long is that player going to be productive? What kind of window running back's going to have? And I think it's a decreasing window. And I don't know that Tyler Algier is that locked in as a guy, right? I mean, he's maybe just a guy in a good situation. And there's something to be said for that, right? A player in a good situation. I don't know. I'm curious to see what the Falcons do in the draft. I probably wouldn't do this either, although, I have concerns about the quarterback situation in San Francisco, at least to start out. That's going to be an issue.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be interesting to see how it plays out in San Francisco. So we'll get to this question here. This is a two-parter we've got. So with Kyle Shanahan reiterating this week that Brock Purdy is our guy when he's healthy, is he a buy-in dynasty? And what do we do with Trey Lance, Bob? Because a lot of us spent some significant draft capital to acquire him in our rookie drafts, and now he's sitting there, may not get used until he gets moved.
He's a hold right now, Trey Lance. The second part of that question is easy. He's a hold because you're not getting anything for him. And that could easily change, right? If his circumstances change, or as we've seen in San Francisco, sometimes their situation changes due to injury, and, maybe he gets another shot. Also, it is encouraging, if you're a Trey Lance person, that, hey, at least he gets that window, whether it's the 6 months or, and I mean, Kyle Shanahan came out and said it might be a little deeper into the season before we actually see Brock Purdy. I do think, that this is the Shanahan play here is he wants the guy on the field that's doing the things he wants done. And that was Brock Purdy last year. I think that made a big difference for the offense. So did Christian McCaffrey, no doubt about it, right?
Of course.
So that, it's not a single variable equation here, but I do think that especially for an offensive-minded coach like Kyle Shanahan, you want that quarterback to be an extension of you, right, as the play caller. And I think Purdy gives him that. And maybe Trey Lance can. And I guess that's the circumstance right now is Trey Lance has a fantastic window to show that he's advanced. And if the season opens and he's the starter and Brock Purdy is healthy, it wouldn't be the most shocking outcome in the world, because why? He's going to get a bunch of reps. He's going to get an opportunity to show that the investment made in him was worth something. And I'm sure that's his desire. So, as things stand right now, I have no reason to believe that Brock Purdy won't be the guy when he's healthy. But I will say that Trey Lance gets an opportunity to change that outlook with the coming weeks of practice.
Okay, so Bob, if you're in a two QB super flex league and you need a second quarterback, are you willing to go out and maybe combo, if you've already got Trey Lance, go get Brock Purdy?
I would try to do that.
What would you be willing to give up to acquire Purdy at this point?
In a super flex, boy, that's pretty tough. Just given the uncertainty of the timing, I probably wouldn't go overboard, and probably the person who's holding him would hold you up, knowing your circumstance. I mean, you're not going into this negotiation in a position of power. You're going in, kneeling and bowing and saying, "Oh, please do me a favor." So you'd probably have to give up more than you want. And I guess for me, someone's going to want a starting player, right? I mean, they're going to want a starting piece. At the very least, and maybe a draft pick. So I'm probably saying, I'd be willing to give up probably a starting running back, and maybe, I'm getting into the third or fourth round pick, and probably will get turned down and held up for more is what I'm thinking.
Hey, everybody. Sorry about that here. We just lost a transformer and I lost power completely. And I see that Bob probably popped off. Unfortunately, I'm going to have to finish this one from my phone without a show sheet. So we've got a few questions in the chat. I'll do the best that I can. First question I'm going to bring up is from Jason Allwine. We have, who is better, Jimmy G or Gardner Minshew? You know, that's a really fair question. Oh, boy. There we go. Hey, Bob. Sorry about that, buddy.
That's okay, man. Things happen.
Yeah, Trent, I don't know if you heard it. A transformer just blew right like across the street from our house. And that was the end of my internet. So there we go.
Putting it back together. That's the adapt and overcome.
Well, you know, in this industry,
that's
right. That's all we can do, right? Well, we're going to get back to it here. I've got a few more we went through the question. So here's what we got. Here's what I got. Oh, come on now. From your phone's not the easiest. What are some stats you use to identify breakout buy low candidates right now, Bob?
So I think it's not like, you know, a single stat or I mean, it's almost more, Nate, a set of circumstances, right? I'm looking for, you know, number one, I mean, players that are obviously cheaper than I think they should be, or that will outproduce their value. But you know, it is more of a confluence. Like, you know, I chase volume for sure, so I'm looking at anticipated volume. So I guess the answer to this is there's not a statistic I'm looking at. I'm looking at a set of circumstances, and it's a, you know, it's not a definitive thing. It's just like, and neither is any stat, by the way, until they get on the field, we don't actually know. So what I'm looking for is there a change in circumstance? Is there, you know, a player who's moved on? Is there a change in coaches? Is there a change of coordinators? And there was a lot of those this year. So a lot of opportunities maybe for players to come on and fill a void in an offense that didn't previously need that. But mostly I'm just looking for players who maybe underperformed last year due to circumstances outside their control, whether it's injury or, you know, another player in their way, or somebody rises up, or just poor coaching. I mean, I think, you know, we mentioned New England not having a coordinator. I mean, I just think that offense in general was kind of dismal because of that, more so than the players. So I'd be looking at players going to better circumstances. That's the thing. That's the bigger issue for me than individual stats. Yes, I look at all the stats, and they all, you know, we all do. We're all looking for, you know, okay, what's the yards per route, and all, you know, all those things that we want to see. All of that goes for naught if a player isn't on the field. So I'm looking for opportunities first and foremost, anticipated volume.
Yep, and that makes sense. Is there a player right now that's moved in free agency that you're excited about, that you maybe are a little bit higher on than you were maybe last season?
I think, yeah, I mean, like, you know, a few of the ones like just the running back moves, I think, you know, like we can all think that Miles Sanders is maybe in a better place in Carolina. Not that, you know, he wasn't very productive last year, but they seem to have an approach. I always joke with the beat writers when I, you know, visit with Eagles beat writers is why don't the Eagles love Miles Sanders as much as we do? Right. And they always, you know, say that's not true. And, you know, well, the numbers say otherwise. The last year's Chicago game suggests otherwise. When, you know, he was going in on a roll, and they didn't use him until the second quarter of that game. I think we're just looking for a place where there's a consistent opportunity. I'd say David Montgomery comes out a little ahead, running behind the offensive line in Detroit. I don't think it's great news for DeAndre Swift, but I don't know if there was any good news coming for DeAndre Swift. It seems like this is another circumstance where I say, look, and these things can, you know, obviously change, you know, as based on circumstances. But what we have to work with so far is the coaching staff in Detroit does not have a great sense that, you know, DeAndre Swift's going to be there for them. And maybe they think limiting him. Like the Cowboys feel like limiting Tony Pollard is their answer, right? They've been open about it. 30 snaps is what they want. Well, he could be pretty productive with that. I don't think the Lions have found that range. And I don't know if they're going to find it with David Montgomery there. This is also, you know, I thought this was going to be good news for Khalil Herbert, a guy that they said was, you know, a favorite of the coaching staff. We started hearing that last June. Then they bring on Deontay Foreman. So I don't know if either guy really makes out like that. I don't know. Jamal Williams could be an advantageous situation, you know, depending on Alvin Kamara's legal situation, right? So if he gets that number one role, he could be in a pretty good spot for a little while. Remember, he can catch the football pretty well too. forgotten from his time in Green Bay. He's kind of turned into a between the tackles guy, but maybe he has a significant role. So, and Damian Harris, I mean, I think the running backs, again, for the reason we stated earlier, is teams don't value them. They're ready to, plug a guy in and get what they can out of him. Buffalo had talked about Brandon Beane, the GM spoke about needing a heavier back, and not great news for James Cook. Those of us invested in him early in best balls or whatnot, but I think it's a good landing spot for Damian Harris, and we'll see what some of these others are. The receivers aren't really thrilling me at this point. I think they'll all be fine. The ones that are moving, Chark and Thielen, and there's a batch of them. So and the quarterbacks I'm going to discount because I don't think any of them at this point. Well, I mean Aaron Rodgers, I guess that's going to change his trajectory a little bit, but it hasn't happened yet. So I'll leave him out of the picture.
No, and that's a fair point. Do you think anything is going to happen? I mean, it just seems like Green Bay is dragging their feet on this. Does he eventually? You think it will happen?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't think anybody's in a panic or a hurry now. I know the Jets are playing this off as that, he knows the offense. Maybe they're playing it off and he does. Nathaniel Hackett's his guy. But I mean, I wonder if they're not just playing this off because they don't want to be in the position of having him and him not showing up for OTAs or whatever, because sometimes he doesn't like to do that, So maybe this is not really a big deal. I think we'll get a draft day or, just before the draft kind of situation with him. And even if it drags out longer, I don't think it's a big concern for the people involved. I mean, in the end, he has all the leverage. If he shows up in Green Bay and says, "I'm here, I'm playing, where's my $60 million?" They're going to wish he wasn't there. So he's going to move on.
Yeah, fair point. Now, do you think with the Alvin Kamara news and knowing that there's a good chance he could be suspended for at least the first half of the season or longer if he even plays in 2023, is there a chance that New Orleans targets a running back in the first round of the draft? Would they go after a guy like Jahmyr Gibbs, who's very similar to an Alvin Kamara type? Not as big, not as bruising, but he has that pass-catching ability, which Jamal Williams can do it. But if you can get a younger guy with that same Kamara upside, possibly, do you think they would do that?
They might, but they're drafting late. So do they? When do they draft the first? It's like, do they even have a first round pick?
I want to say that
hold on.
I believe they do have a first round pick. Yes.
Yeah, they picked overall first round pick. They got it from the Broncos. That's right. They got it for the head coach. So it's actually not that bad. Yep. So they might. Right. So, I suppose it's possible. Right. I mean, we'll find out how teams really feel about Bijan Robinson and Jahmyr Gibbs. I mean, I think Robinson for sure is a guy that seems like it's, top 10 is possible. But the way the teams value, they could. I've talked to John Hendricks from SI about a week ago. He thought they might wait a little longer and do it later in the draft. So that kind of is where I've been leaning, but I suppose it's possible.
Well, maybe they're in on Tyjae Spears, day 2, day 3 pick. I can see that as well. The kid out of Tulane's incredibly talented, and he showed at the combine he can catch passes. So if that's something they're looking for, I'm kind of in on that as well. But I do think they're more likely to go late in the draft. But how sexy would it be if they went after Jahmyr Gibbs early? I personally would love it for that offense. I think it'd be great for Derek Carr too.
I love Gibbs, so I would agree with that. I think it'd be a great play, and it might be a great opportunity. We'll have to see. The problem with the Kamara situation is we're not going to have clarity until probably the first week of August. I think the trial is set for July 31st, and the NFL's not going to do anything. I think if you're sitting here and you're a betting person, that you could probably bet the league's eagerly awaiting their opportunity. I'm sure everyone out here follows Drew Davenport and has seen some of his takes, and I'm kind of with him. I'm not, I can find plenty of value in my early best balls, and I'm avoiding the Alvin Kamara portion of the draft. I'm also avoiding the Lamar Jackson portion of the draft right now. It's, I'll have plenty of times to catch up and get shares of him if things change. I mean, do I have a couple cheaper shares right now? Yes, but just a couple, right? I'm not out there going, oh, wow, this is a great value. I want this on every roster. No, I want more clarity. And so there's a handful of players where, I don't really feel the need to go out there and invest, at a discount without some clarity. And Alvin Kamara is definitely one of those.
Absolutely. So, Bob, I got to ask, this will be our last question here. I'm a Donovan Peoples-Jones guy. Love the guy. Do you think Elijah Moore now in Cleveland, does that ding Donovan Peoples-Jones, or does it not affect his fantasy value at this point?
I'm trying to pretend it doesn't because I had been investing fairly heavily in Peoples-Jones, you're getting him as a, wide receiver 5 kind of guy in current best balls.
Yeah.
And that hasn't really changed that much with Moore there. And so I do think they tend to drive in different lanes. So, I mean, Moore can't play inside or out. So I'm not saying he's not going to get some outside work, but I still think, Peoples-Jones has some value as long as you're not overpaying for him. So I'll probably still invest in him. Usually these moves like create, like drops in value for like a DVP, which, people done with Peoples-Jones. I mean, I think that makes sense that people would dial back on him a little bit. If that's the case, and I'm getting him as a wide receiver 6, I'll still have some shares of that. I'm kind of like not going to chase more if he rises up, though. I'll wait and see on that.
I'm with you. I feel like Moore's value is kind of capped because of his skill set in that offense. And DPJ is going to be the touchdown guy. He's going to be that deep threat for Deshaun Watson. Hopefully Deshaun Watson kind of gets it together a little bit more this season, having a full offseason to practice with the team, get more involved in the offense. I guess we'll have to wait and see, Bob. Well, sir, thank you so much for coming on with me today. Sorry about the technical difficulties. I'll talk to Excel Energy about, please, this is the 4th time our transformer's blown in a year. So they're going to need to get that fixed, right?
No, they don't have to fix anything.
That's a fair point. They don't have to do anything. All right, Bob, thank you so much for coming on, and we'll get you out of here. Everybody, thanks for tuning in. Have a great rest of your week.